Hi guys, and welcome to Building a Nation Added Time at End of Season 2 sort of analysis thing. Now obviously you got to bear in mind that these analysis videos are sort of my thoughts on things. So yeah, my thoughts can sometimes be wrong, but after all, they're my thoughts, they're opinions. So, you know, an opinion is just one of those things. So if you disagree, that's totally fine. But remember, this is my opinion on the squad. That's basically what it is. I'm just telling you what I think, you know. So if you are enjoying these, of course, do drop a like on the video. That'd be spectacular. Now, first thing we're going to do is go through the squad and just do a little squad report, show you kind of who's been improving, who's been falling. I think it's mostly going to be improvements this year of the general first team squad. We're then going to take a little look at some of the players that I've got 100% scouted to maybe have a look at in the summer. Then we'll get into sort of the stats for the league and obviously the comparisons of the player stats, which is again another very subjective area. I might read things differently to you, but that's okay. That's what makes football good. You can interpret things differently. Anyway, let's get into things. Let's look at Alexander Monk's squad first, since he is right at the top of this list. Now, obviously, since we've just played, we can kind of ignore the downward arrows on a lot of these things. Now, he still looks like, I mean, he's already a 3-star player in this squad. He's had a fantastic season. Probably my standout player of the year has been Monk's squad, as well as the likes of, well, not Olsen, but Sobby's actually had a really good season as well. But Monk's squad, for me, is my player of the year. 1.3 million he's now worth, and I expect that in the summer we are going to struggle to hang on to him. I really, really do. But, you know, we've got options elsewhere. Filip Novak is one of them who can actually play on both wings. Again, 3-star player, which is why it's really good to have him back towards the end. I think I don't think he actually played for the last few games of the season because of what was he? Oh, he had a slipped disc in his back, didn't he? Hopefully he'll be back for next year. But hopefully, again, the likes of Paul Griffiths, the Australian and that, will start to come through and overtake some of these guys, I'm hoping, over the coming seasons. And we'll have a really good, once some of them start bedding themselves into the team, there'll be like 5 more waiting in the wings to get those positions. And I don't think it'll be long before we have a full team of them at times. I think by the end of next season, we'll probably be able to put out a full team of regens. Not every game, of course, but in like rotation stuff, and then it will slowly start to take over and over and over like that, essentially. Moving on to Peter Obifule, who, of course, is new to the club this year. But look at that, again, 2.5 stars already. He's 18 years old, Nigerian, can play on that left-hand side brilliantly. I'm liking him. It says professional personality too, which is nice to see. Promising midfielder. I like him a lot. He's got lovely 5-star potential, and it's stayed as well, which is really important for me. You know, sometimes players' potential as a variable drops when they actually join the club, but Obifule has stayed at 5 stars, and I wonder how far he can push that, because that's 5 stars in this team, but he could reach that and still have 5 stars more than, you know what I mean? Like that could be a lot. For all we know, that could be way more than the maximum ability of this team. We just don't know. For all we know, he could be Sisto. I mean, it's hard to tell at this point. He's very tall as well, which is kind of interesting for a sort of wing player. Great jumping reach, but unfortunately his heading is woeful, which is interesting. That's an interesting one to note, actually. But there you go. So that's Obifule. I'm really impressed with him this season for what he's played. Olsen has played a little bit less this year, just because of the emergence of Sobby doing so well in those positions. But the fact is, Olsen is still only 21 years old. He's got a lot to give, and when he and Sobby rotate in that centre midfield and attacking midfield position, particularly the attacking mid position, they do spectacular work, basically. He's more of an assister for that. You know, he's got 3 assists and 2 goals. Sobby's definitely played there more, but I'm not sure about Olsen. We're going to keep him, obviously, because he's a fantastic player. But if we were to get a decent-sized bid, like I'm talking big money bids, then it might be wise for us to actually think about moving him on. I'm not sure. I think he's still too young for that. But if we were to get a stupidly high bid, then you never know. Jacob Poulsen, on the other hand, obviously he's 33 years old. Now, his contract is up at the end of next season, and I'm thinking about probably letting that one expire. That way he could go to another Danish side, or maybe even moving him in to another Danish side this summer on a relatively cheap deal. Maybe do a player exchange one to just ship him off to someone like Copenhagen, maybe. You could probably do with him over there at the moment, to be honest. He's still got solid stats, but I feel like at 33 years old, he's not really long for this team, and I want to get someone else to have some use out of him before, you know, he didn't play as much this year, and I want to make sure he gets some game time for someone. Pusic is another one of these players that he's 29 years old now, and he's still got goals in his game, but I feel like he'll only ever be able to be a backup striker for us, which is an issue because he's got that 2.5-star potential and the current ability, and I feel like it won't be long before one of our regen strikers starts to reach that level if Williamson continues what he's doing and Julian Ibrahim joins him in that. Andre Roma, of course, what a man. Look at the amount of positions this guy can play. He's actually competent, or at least able to play in every position bar left wing back, which is very interesting to note. He's only 23. Yes, he's only got 3-star potential, but I think he's a fantastic player. And he and Monk's squad really do have some great competition for places in that right-back slot. And he can play elsewhere, which is very, very useful as well. Daniel Royer, 1.5 million, decent value. He's on decent money as well, but again, only 3 stars in this team. I still think he's had a solid season. He's got 7 goals and 2 assists in the league. Really good. I'm liking him. But again, I feel like he will slowly be phased out over the years. Raimi Sakibo, what can you say about this guy? He's 3 stars already in this team. That heading, marking, tackling is a little on the low side. He's 20 years old now. Doesn't dive into tackles, which I think actually isn't such a bad thing considering his tackling isn't that good. It's not a bad PPM to have, I suppose. I've been quite pleased with him. 25 appearances this year. He needs to step it up a little bit, as you can see from his average rating, but I still think that he's a solid player for us, and he's got lots of room to continue improving, and that's kind of important for me. Harmeet Singh. Now, he missed a lot of the latter part of the season with that broken ankle. It's weird that he only has 13 long shots, but he does have lots of long shooting ability, and maybe that's why we sort of were fooled into thinking that he was good at long shots, simply because he takes a lot of them. In the same way that someone that gambles a lot is considered to be a good gambler. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Pione Sisto, he seems to be at sort of max potential now, despite only being 22 years old. The speed, the technical ability, he does like a little bit in the old getting back department, but then in the league that doesn't really matter so much. 16 goals, 7 assists. Very, very pleased with him. Not really much more than we can say about him. Still only worth £3.2 million. However, it's one of those things where if a couple of years from now we get a £30 million bid, I might have to accept it just because I feel like for the benefit of the club, it would probably be the right thing to do, basically. Ramadan Sobhi, again, 1.8 million he's worth. And look at that. He actually he still has more potential to be gained as well. He's still only 19 years old. He's had a fantastic season with 7 goals and 12 assists. And in all competitions, 12 goals, 13 assists. I think he's the only player to break into double figures for both of those this year. And that is spectacular. He really does have... He's really shaping up to be a fantastic player, and I am enjoying that tremendously. The Sparv stuff, 13 years old, 30 years old, he's our captain. He's a decent player. How many years he's got left of being a really solid player in our midfield, I don't know, but he's certainly got that experience, which is quite useful for us. He's got lovely technical stats as well, and some decent mentals, those flaring off the ball. Not really that important for a defensive midfielder, so we can kind of forgive that one in some respects. Malcolm Wilhelmsson, he's 1.5 stars overall now. He's Swedish, he is 17 years old now. I don't know if he was 17 as well when he joined, I think. But he's just been going up in droves. He's got a gloriously coiffed hair and a lovely beard, and you know I like a good beard. So far this season, he's started 7 games, he's scored 8 goals. I mean, you can't really argue with that. I feel like as he gets better, there might be room for that. Now, he does strike me as a sort of target man type of player because he's decent-ish in the air. He's not super tall, though, so I do wonder if maybe we can start to train that out of him. But he definitely has that ability to win those headers, and that's something Cadlets really has lacked in his time so far. Mikkel Anderson, he'll be joining Levante, unfortunately. He refused to sign a new deal as a backup keeper for us, so we will have to look at bringing in a young regen keeper to fill that backup role next year, which is fine, because I do want to bring one through anyway, so that makes sense. Patrick Bangard, he can be very hit and miss. Like, he has some fantastic games, but then at the same time he also has some really, really poor games at times. Like, he was superb against the likes of City and PSG, although he did make a horrible error in one of the games as well, I think. So it kind of is a bit of swings and roundabouts with him. But again, still fairly young, seems to be maxing out his potential a little bit now, so might be one of those things we have to take a look at. Johan Darlene, now, he's a good keeper. He's 30 years old, and this is why I think we need to get ourselves a young understudy and fast. That way we can rotate them, have him play in some league games, start to build his confidence. A Mihailo Langura type of player, if you will. Babagide David, I liked the guy, but I didn't feel like he was going to get much of a chance this year, and I do wonder if maybe another loan spell wouldn't be such a bad idea for him, because at least that way he's playing for somebody, and we can get him out to another club in Denmark, which obviously is what I'll try to do. Then I think that would probably be beneficial for us. Mikael Dulan, he has had a lot less games this year than I would have liked, but I think it's just because he had a few niggly injuries and they came at the wrong time, and what happened then is players came into his position and started playing extraordinarily well, and as a result of that, it meant that he really struggled to get back in the team. Now, hopefully over the summer he'll sort of regroup, come back stronger, and get a lot more game time next year, because when you look, he did okay, 4 goals, 10 assists. He started off the season brilliantly with the assists, but then just sort of faded away very, very quickly. Jonas Gemma, there's not really a lot to say about that because he hasn't actually played for us this season at all, but he's been playing out on loan at Hobro, who of course won the league, I think, so there is also that. Kian Hansen, I love the man, 28 years old, so another one of these ones that, he's still got quite a few good years left in him, I'd say, for us, but we do still need to look at players that could potentially fill in for him when he's not there, because he has had a few injury problems this year as well. Junior Ibrahim, he's actually 2 stars, but as you can see, that potential is not at 5 stars. It's sort of like, it's decent, it's sort of just sub of Pione Sisto type of level of potential, obviously different positions, but it's still not bad. And the fact is, he's got 3 goals in 1 start for us. He's played, he's got 2 goals in the league, scored an absolute screamer in 1 game. So I like the lad. I think there's a lot more to come from him, and hopefully he is a bit temperamental though, and that is a worry for me, because I sense that means more red cards in his future. Václav Kadlec. Part of me still thinks that moving him on in the summer might not be such a bad idea, because we could probably get ourselves like £3 million, maybe even 4 or 5 million for him from the right side, and I wonder if that would be a good idea or not. I'm not sure on that one yet, still debating it, but 25 goals this year. He's actually gone backwards from what he did last year, despite our huge improvement as a squad, breaking all kinds of goal scoring records and league point scoring records, which is obviously easier because there's more games, but even so. Kaan Kerinen, really like this lad, actually. He just sort of was sitting in our youth academy sort of squads last year, brought him in for a couple of games, scored on his debut, and this year he's put in some really solid performances in that midfield. Still only 18 years old, but as you can see, he does have a cap for Finland already. There's a lot more to come from this guy, I think, and if he can start to get some of that, if he can boost his potential, not his potential, his current ability, and go up another star next season, he's really starting to then argue for a starting position in virtually every game, and I think Nikolai Kirk is in that similar position. As you can see, Kirky is probably closer to performing at that level already. Hasn't had a call-up for Denmark yet, as you can imagine, the squad is slightly more competitive in order to get into it. But again, if he could go up another level this year, then again, he and Keranen look like they could be a midfield partnership for quite a while. Our Mabil is on loan at Rounders at the moment, but I just think that he might be one of those players we could cash in. And by cash in, I just mean move on to another club. When you look at his form, which he's not played in. Stupid Matt. Razvan Marin, of course, has been out on loan as well. We'll ignore these guys for now. Sergio Maris, again, 2 stars, looking like a solid player for us. He's got hopefully a lot more to come. Can play in quite a few positions as well, which is a godsend in this team. He's got a bit of ambition, which is both worrying and nice to see at the same time. But again, if he can take it up another level next year, he could be one of the first sort of regen players to break through into the team. The young ones anyway. Sakibo, I feel like, had a bit of an advantage because he came in as a very older regen, and we're back to Monk squad. So, here's the shortlist that we have currently. There's 114 players on it. Now, as you can see, not all of them are scouted. Our knowledge levels on most of them is 100%, and then it's 22 basically. It's either 100 or 22. There's a couple that have been getting ready to scout, but for the most part, those ones are all ones I've been adding to the shortlist, waiting to go out and send scouts out. But that's going to take until the summer before we can look at any of those players. You notice there's a few from Jamaica in there, and I was very surprised to see players from Jamaica that my assistant considered worth looking at. Now, what I'm doing with the big countries generally is basically just ignoring players that have no intention of joining us, according to my assistant. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because otherwise, this list would have like 400 players on it, and it'd be impossible to navigate properly. And at this stage, I want to just go, if I've got a chance, when we get to those sort of smaller countries, then I will look for ones that might not be interested as much. As you can see from the USA here, we've got a few. But when it comes to the big countries, I just don't want to waste my time scouting and looking at players who have no intention of joining us. Where, for example, with countries like France, vast majority of any decent player from France is not going to be interested in joining us. However, players from look at this, a player from Paris FC here, which is really kind of cool. Players like these guys are playing for slightly lower sides, so they might have a chance at actually joining us. Apologies to that, guys. And Red Star as well. Red Star Paris, of course. Now, right, sorry about that, guys. I just had a random throat clearing session, which took much longer than I expected. Anyway, as you can see, there's a few players from Jamaica, which I thought was rather cool. We actually found a few that were worth looking at. Carl Johnson, they're okay. Like, we won't know exactly how good they are until we've got a proper scout report. For all we know, he could be 2-star potential, or he could be, 4.5 star. You just don't know with these things. I've just noticed that there's a guy called Simon Thomas here that plays in Austria, former Sky Sports presenter, and of course, Blue Peter presenter. Now, looking down this list, obviously there's a lot of players from the likes of Russia and Croatia, because this is where we're kind of up to in terms of our actual scouting at the moment. I think we've a few from Costa Rica as well, which is kind of interesting. But if we just sort them, looking at the ones at the top here, now, these are the ones that we've got fully scouted. Now, you'll notice that there's a guy here called Irki Nurmi, who I was looking at before, and I'm still tempted to bring... Oh, no, hang on, that's not the guy. Or maybe it was. I don't know. I thought there was a Finnish goalkeeper I was looking at, but I can't remember the guy's name. Maybe I've deleted him. But yeah, so as you can see, there's a few of these guys are obviously joining us. Like Michael Greenwood, of course, is already going to be signing up to join. I need to go through and remove players that are joining us from this shortlist, just to make it a little bit easier for us. But for example, the likes of Ryan Murphy, this guy I'm really, really excited about, because for a start, he's a fullback on the left-hand side. Secondly, he's American, which I find rather cool, and I'd like to bring in an American regen, a good one. I've never had a good American regen. He might cost us quite a bit. He says he has no interest in joining, but I feel like I can change his mind on that one. And I really do just want to bring this guy in because he'd be a great fullback addition to the team, I feel like. Make a great sort of backup in that role. Yeah, he's 20 years old already, but I feel like he would be a really solid player to bring in. And it'd be cool to have a player like that playing for us. So he's one of the ones I'm kind of really interested in, particularly interested in so far. Now, it's difficult. I could go through and show you all of these. Now, I'm not going to go after Bernard Usman just because of that asking price. What people have told me in the comments is that apparently... these guys, this one team for some reason, Carno Pillars, just seem to have their players at ridiculous prices for no apparent reason. So I don't think we'll be able to go after him because most of our budget there is basically done. 2.36 million in the budget. Plus, remember, we're going to have to take that down a little bit because our wage budget is quite small at the moment. So we've not got a lot to work with, but we're still going to be doing it. And remember, there's players coming in the summer anyway that are going to be joining from previous windows. So it's still not all bad. And I still reckon we can get in 7 or 8 of these guys. But I'm mostly just looking in the 100% club at the moment. Now, what that actually means. Of course, you can see some of these guys have got huge asking prices. A lot of the Argentinians probably not going to be able to touch any of those guys because of the stupidly high asking prices for our level, of course. But we could still go after the likes of some of these. Well, I'm mostly going to concentrate on Sweden, Algeria, Brazil. These sort of players here are ones I'm going to be potentially looking at. But of course, if I feel like I could get in on some of these guys, like this guy, I'm still tempted to go after this lad. I've been scouting him for quite a while, and I just wonder if he's the sort of player that we should be going after, because we now do have him fully scouted. He seems to have decent level of potential, as well as other things. Solid determination, decent tackling, not bad at free kicks either. He does argue with officials, but I think we've talked about this before. But I feel like we could probably pick him up for a lot less than what they're saying there, particularly if we structured the deals in the right way. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm not going to go through, again, every single player, because that would just take ridiculous amounts of time, and it's pointless because we won't be signing most of them anyway. Now, I thought we'd move on to the team stats, basically. Now, this episode is probably going to be longer than the previous one, because I just decided to pack stuff into it instead, because the fact is, if you're wanting to watch this sort of thing, you're probably interested in that anyway, so we might as well just take a relaxed approach and just go through pretty much anything we can find. So, looking at average possession, we're certainly much higher than we were last year. I can't remember exactly where we were on this last year, but I can't imagine it was as high as that. Over the coming seasons, I want to start making that one our number one. We want to make sure we're winning on that one. A few teams seem to have ways of getting past us on that. We've actually scored 5 out of 5 penalties this year, which is really, really nice to see. And Vibo got none, as you can see there. Headers won, again, we're actually slightly higher on it this time, so that's not too bad. Headers won ratio, again, we're not too low, but as you can see, AGF really do seem to be excelling on the old headers won situation. Yellow cards overall, 43. We're not right at the top. We're not doing a Chelsea like we did back in the day. Now, looking down the list a little bit more, these ones I'm not really that bothered about because they're streaks, and that's not really that important to us. Goals scored, though, look at this, 86 goals scored. The next behind that was actually Brøndby, who weren't even in the championship group, but that kind of makes sense, I guess, because they could probably cream those teams. But we literally scored 33 more goals than any other team in the league, and we've got goals for days. And what I mean is, how on earth have we scored 86 goals in the league and Cadlets has only got 15 of those? Where have the other 71 goals come from? I feel like with a good striker in this team, we could easily get over 100 goals in the league. However, I would prefer to get to the point where the other teams are catching us up to the point where we can't really get away with doing that. Cross completion, 17. That is more like it, folks. I'm really pleased with to see us up there. And crosses completed, vastly better than anyone else, because I guess that's one of our main ways of scoring. 7 goals from corners this season, not too bad. Ronda's up there with 9, but 7, I will take that. I'm not sure how many we've conceded from corners. We only conceded 1 last year from corners, which wasn't too bad. Goals from direct free kicks, there's been 3 all season. FM still can't be asked to fix that issue. Goals from indirect free kicks, we've only scored 2, which is interesting. But our pass completion is the best in the league now, which means we're starting to become a little bit more confident in those areas, and that is pleasing to me. Not as many passes as Ronda's, but still pretty decent. Also nice to note that our shots on target ratio is vastly better than it was before. I remember last season we were down in sort of the 30s, I think. If I remember correctly, we were right down there on shots on target, or is it 37 or something? But this year, much more clinical with our chances. We're actually hitting the target more, which is fantastic. Number of shots on target, 330. That is 120 more than anyone else in the league. We are battering the goals. That's quite clearly what's happening. Conceding quite a few fouls as well, not conceding, you know what I mean, earning them, dribbling more than anyone else, but only just more than Copenhagen. They clearly got something going right. As for goals conceded, though, not the most. Aarberg and Sønderjyske actually have conceded less than us. I think it's probably, damn it, if we hadn't have had those 3 goals conceded against Odense, I think it was, in that horrible game, then we might actually have won that. But that's an area I want to improve as well. Conceded from corners, 6 this year, which is interesting because we're playing the same tactic as the previous season. But it is what it is. In fact, we've won the league at a canter. However, I want to see, if we start doing that in Europe, then I would worry a little bit more. Goals conceded for direct free kicks, pretty appalling. And again, we're still quite far down here on the conceded from free kicks one, unfortunately. That's an area I wish we could just get rid of that. We'd certainly be a lot better. AGF leading on clean sheets, but we're top, we're joint top on them anyway. Fouls made, at least we're not right up the top on that one. Tackles won, sort of, that's fine by me. How's our, hello, that's a little bit low, but then I suppose, if we're not in a position to win that many, the fact is we've got the ball most of the time, as we've already shown, and we're generally the ones attacking. So when we're actually getting into tackles, we're probably not just making that many tackles in general. I would be interested to know. That being said, I think I could still be doing a little bit higher. Penalties conceded, we've definitely conceded, 2. Kyrgyz definitely need to sort out their penalties and whatnot. Average attendance. Now, ours is still a little bit low, and our stadium capacity is still only 11,000, which means I think we've got the highest. Oh, hang on. Yeah, by quite some distance. Now, people have said, build a new stadium. Now, I will do that, but not yet. There's no point in us doing that yet. For what we actually get from like attendances at this point, it is minimal. But the stadium bill would cost us millions of pounds, which we then couldn't spend on infrastructure, things like facilities, and also bringing in players. And I feel like that's a waste at this point in the save. When we get to the stage where we really are selling out our stadium every week in European games, we've got money to burn all over the spot, then we will go for a new stadium or expand the one we currently have. Just because I feel like it's a waste of money at this point. We've sold out the stadium twice, and we're the only team in the league to have done that, which is quite good. Lowest attendances, not really that important. Net transfer spend, interesting to note, which is weird. We've actually somehow made £747,000, which doesn't really make any sense to me because I don't remember selling anybody, particularly in the summer, not for huge money, but I will take it. Oh, wait, hang on. That's because we've actually spent money, isn't it? What am I talking about? So, yeah. Interestingly, Odense have spent quite a fair bit, but Brøndby have lost quite a few players, clearly. Salary per annum, we're still number 2 on that one, but as you can see, they're spending nearly £10 million per annum, and they've not even managed to qualify for Europe. That is appalling. They really need to sort it out next year. I want next year, I want them to run us close. I really want them to run us close for the league. That's the plan anyway. Looking at Player of the Match awards, Sisto actually won that with 7, which is very surprising to see. As for average rating, again, Roma and Sisto and Sobby and Cadlet's interesting up there, and Monk scored 2. Lots of players dominating the upper echelons of that, which is nice to see. Sisto, in the end, as a result of his finish, I'm guessing, somehow overtaking Cadlet's to get into that spot. That doesn't feel right to me. I feel like, hang on, let me just quickly check that. Oh no, apparently that was the case. It must be from that final day of the season game, I guess. Of course, yeah, I forgot about that. So not too bad there. Shots on target, Serda is right either, but Royer actually has a decent level on that one, and so does Sisto, which would explain his number of goals. Cadlet's, though, nowhere to be seen. Big shocker there. Sobby's been on the pitch for the most goals. 75 goals have been scored whilst Ramadan Sobby is on the pitch. That is glorious to me. That really does say a lot. Cadlet's a little bit lower down, it's fair to say. Penalties, obviously, Poulsen has scored 2, Sparva scored 2, and Cadlet's actually took a penalty as well. I can't imagine why I let him do that. Assists, though, Sobby is right up there, so is Roma. Sisto in there too, Julian, Monk scored, and Cadlet's. Monk scored, obviously didn't get many of his assists in the league, which is a shame. He seemed to be very good in the Cup and in Europe getting those assists. Key passes, again, Sobby winning on that one as well. He really has had an outstanding season. I wonder if he should be player of the year instead. Pass completion, our goalkeeper has 90% pass completion, which is astonishing. No one else comes even close, and it makes me wonder if that's the reason our pass completion is so high on average, because our goalkeeper has 90%. Cross completion, Kian Hansen, centre-back, though he has played it right back a few times, so I guess we can accept that. Sisto at 19% though, far better. Roma at 17. You can understand why that's the case. Looking at dribbles per game, Sisto's up there again, but Roland Lamar, he looks really, really good. And before anyone goes, you got to sign him. He's 29 years old, and he plays in Belgium. He plays in Denmark. Because I'm still getting people saying, sign this guy, and they're like 35. So, teams conceded. Wow. That Harmalainen guy seems to know what he's doing, Jesus. And Aalborg, I've got a couple of good players in those positions as well. Tackles per game, you'd expect our players to be a little bit lower on that, just because we're not having to make so many tackles, and that's fair enough. Mistakes leading to goals. Sparvy, mate, with your 2, that's not so good, and Bangard with 2 as well. We'll have to take a look at that. Looking at mistakes overall, though, nowhere to be seen, and that is pleasing. Key tackles, again, I wouldn't expect to have anyone on this list. Oh, actually, well done, Bangard. Hello, there's a regen player playing for Kurga. Let's have a look at him. Do we know anything about him? No, we don't. Of course not, because I'm not scouting Denmark. Let's see what else we... Oh, hang on. We've gone all the way down here. Right, here we go. Key headers. Again, Bangard's doing okay, but I wouldn't expect us to be up there that much, because once again, isn't Sane a forward? I feel like he scored a goal against us, unless that was from a set piece or something, which wouldn't be that surprising considering the number of key headers he's made. Interceptions, Bangard's up there, and Sakibo's in there too, which I guess is one of his sort of... I guess he's got decent anticipation, it would suggest. Headers 1 ratio. Tim Sparv is actually very high on that one. Maybe he's good in the air. That's surprising, actually, considering he's made a few errors. But there you go. Conceded overall. Darlene has conceded 1 more goal than Jesper Rask, which is a shame. Clean sheets, of course, is level on that one. Saves held, much, much lower on that one. But I suppose he's faced less shots in general, so it would make sense that he would be a little bit lower on that one. Anyway, let's go into the comparisons so we can take a quick look at those. And, yeah, let's do this. Right, so looking at goalkeepers, basically, we're going to just have a little look at Darley and see how he's really done this year. 80% save ratio, that is creme de la creme of what I would want to see from a goalkeeper. Not only that, but he seems to be, in general, holding away. In fact, he's holding 50% more than he's parrying. He's getting decent ratings overall, decent pass completion. I think he's had a really solid season for us. He's made a couple of little mistakes, 2 in the league, which is a shame. But I don't know. I feel like Darlene is definitely going to be in that spot for a couple of years to come yet, until such time as a young buck comes through to try and dethrone him. Now, looking at centre-backs, we're basically just looking at these four, and that actually does make sense. Now, Spav has played a lot in the midfield, so we kind of have to be a little bit careful with that. But really, it's Hansen, Sakibo, and Bangard that we're looking at. Now, crosses we're not that bothered about. Tackles 1 ratio I'm kind of interested in. All above 80, though. So Sakibo is down at 80, but that's still decent. 80 is fine. And I think that's possibly down to his, not so fantastic tackling. But that's fine. I feel like hopefully he'll make up for it in other areas. If he's got a decent headers 1 ratio, then I would be much more impressed with him and want to keep playing him, essentially. So, that's the crosses completed. Oh, we don't need that one, because it's centre-backs. I'm not that interested in that. Assists, they've got a few, which is nice to see, but again, that could come from when Hansen was playing at right-back, and I suggest that it probably did. Pass completion. Sakibo down at 67. I would like it above 70, ideally. Bangard doing okay, and Hansen doing solidly in those roles as well. Average ratings overall, again, Sakibo is the weak link, but remember, he is much younger than these other guys, I feel like, and hopefully he will work into his role, but I am already noticing that he does certainly seem to be off the pace in a lot of these defensive areas, and I do wonder if that's an area that we might have to take a look at in terms of maybe not playing him quite as much. I don't know, because I'm not liking what I'm actually seeing here. Games 1, but look at this, headers 1, Spav doing decently, Bangard not too bad, Hansen fairly solid, but Sakibo only 64% on that one. That is another worrying factor. I'm not really seeing what he's contributing to the team at the moment. He's not winning that many tackles compared to the other guys. He is not completing that many passes, and he's not winning that many headers either. And he's made a few less mistakes, but he's also played a few less games. So there is also that. His interceptions are fairly low. They're kind of in line with a lot of the other guys, actually, so that's not too bad. But yeah, it's not great. I must say, I'm not particularly enthralled by his performances for us so far this year, and that's something we definitely need to look at next year and keep an eye on that, basically. Looking at fullbacks, though, and we're really only looking at Novak, Römer, and Munksgaard here. Now, very much noticeable that Novak made 3 mistakes leading to goals last year, which does sort of suggest to me that he's a little bit complacent. And we did often have, he would either play really, really well or have quite poor games, whereas the likes of Römer and Munksgaard seem to be a little bit more consistent. Looking at tackles 1 ratio, though, Novak is definitely head and shoulders above them as a defensive player as well. But Munksgaard seems to have a little bit more defensive capability than Römer, based on what the stats were saying. And I know a lot of people saying, these stats don't matter, it's about their attributes. But the thing is, these stats are literally the manifestation of their attributes and the team and the strategy that you're playing. So you can read a lot into how many tackles a player is winning. They're important things to note. If you're not interested in that, that's totally fine. But my point is, some people are. Apologies for that. So, key tackles, quite important. Actually, we'll look at crosses too. Novak seems to be the lowest actually on those ones, which again would suggest that he's probably a slightly better of the defensive ones. But then he seems to make more mistakes. So maybe that is definitely an area where maybe we could do with getting another left back in. Obviously, we're going to be doing that anyway, because we've got Paul Griffiths, and I want to give him some game time next season. But Römer just seems to be better with his cross completion as well. Novak does seem to make more key tackles, though, which is what I would say, but then it's probably because he's putting himself in a position to have to make the tackle. So there is also that. But when you look at the assists as well, Novak only 2 assists throughout a full season where he's played 33 games, whereas Römer has 12 and Munksgaard has 15. So between them, they've got 27 down this right-hand side, and Novak only 2 on the left, and that's suggesting that perhaps he isn't quite the player that he was before. Pass ratio, again, lowest on that one, whereas Römer and Munksgaard are dominating. Now, of course, we are doing things slightly differently because, of course, our right-back are set to attack, so that would make sense as to why they're probably slightly more elevated in terms of the pitch, and of course getting more chances to put balls in, which I guess does make sense. But Novak's also made less tackles, so those guys are attacking more, but they're also getting back in making more tackles per game, so it does still baffle me. But Novak also has a much lower average rating than those two guys, but again, assists I guess are worth more than a good tackle, so there is also that to bear in mind. Headers 1, they're all kind of within a decent range. Munksgaard slightly lower than the others, but not noticeably huge. As long as it doesn't drop below 60, I'm not too bothered about that. Key passes, Römer is fantastic, Munksgaard not too bad either. He seems to get a lot of crosses in and assists without that many key passes. He seems to have a tendency to get that ball in the box nice and quickly. Key headers, when you look at this, of course, Novak definitely doing more of a defensive duty there, but again, it might be because he's in the position to have to do so. Mistakes, Novak's actually made less mistakes, but more mistakes leading to goals, which is an interesting thing to note, if nothing else. Assists-wise, you'd expect Novak to do quite well on that one. He certainly dwarfs the other two, but I guess that's because he's in a position to do so. So it's certainly interesting. I think this will be more interesting once we get some of the younger players into these positions and see how they fare compared to some of the more experienced pros. Now, on to the wingers. Now, obviously, there's a huge sort of field of players here. Now, what we're really interested in is Sobby a little bit, Sisto, Julian, Royer, Maris, and Obifule, potentially. So mistakes leading to goals. Sisto actually made one, which is surprising. I don't know where he managed to find time to do that, but there you go. Tackles 1. Maris was 76%, which is fairly high. Looking down a bit lower, though, Dulan is much, much lower. So is Sisto. To be fair, Maris is the only one that seems to really put a shift in from a defensive position, and he's not made that many appearances, but enough for me to be able to look at that stat and go, that's definitely noticeably high. Cross completion, Julian at 19, Maris at 18, Sisto 17, Royer 15, Sobby 15, Obifule only at 7 though, and that is very, very low, and something we probably need to take a little look at. What is his crossing stat like? Let's just take a little gander here. 14, you'd expect a little bit higher from him, to be honest, given that he's only, but hey, maybe a bit more game time and he'd be able to find it. He's only played 380 minutes, so maybe if he's got at least 1,000 minutes, I could probably take that into account a little bit more. Key tackles, wingers, I mean, that being said, Royer and Sobby have actually made a few decent key tackles, so give them the credit there, I suppose. As for goals, 20 overall for Pione Sisto. Sobby's, oh no, Sisto actually broke through the double figures on both categories as well, actually, didn't he? So I've got to give him credit where credit's due. Or Duland. No, player of the match, Sisto, of course, you'd expect him to have as many as that, and he has done fantastically well this year. I noticed we got a bid on Cadlets. That's interesting. I haven't noticed that, unless it's still the old one that they never actually responded to. Pass completion, Royer is nice and solid. I'd like to get everybody above 70 on that one, and they are nicely above it, in fact. The lowest one is 76, and that's Sobby, and that's still pretty damn good. So I'll take that any day of the week. Dribbles per game, you'd expect Sisto to be really high on that one, and he is, which is fine by me. Shots on target ratio, Royer again doing well. Nobody really, again, Obifule quite low on that one, and Maris not too bad. Not too high on that one either. Average rating wise, Sisto again dominating, with Sobby not too far behind on that one as well. Headers 1, just looking at games 1, that's interesting, but then I suppose these guys will often have been playing against poorer teams, so that kind of makes sense too. Headers 1, Obifule, he's got that heading ability, and I'm guessing that kind of comes from the fact that we were looking at this. He might not have the best heading ability, but he's got huge jumping reach, and he's very, very tall, and it seems to be making up for it, so it means that we're keeping the ball in those areas quite a bit as well, and that's really playing out in the number. Look at 85% headers 1. That's really good. Only 6 key headers, though, but I suppose in that position it's not that important, and plus if you played a full season, you never know what you could have achieved. Key passes, Sobby is dominating there, with Sisto not doing too bad either. The left-hand side, there's been so much rotation down there that perhaps it's difficult to tell. Sobby's been pretty much consistent all season, and so has Sisto for the most part. Mistakes, Sobby's made quite a few of them, but I suppose he's under a lot more pressure than the others because of where he generally plays. Interceptions, Poulsen doing quite good, but we're not looking at Poulsen, are we? Sobby, again, nice and high on that one, which is what I want to see. So, yeah, I feel like, again, I'm just looking through these stats at a kind of cursory glance at this point, because it's not like with Wimbledon, where I was coming in here going, right, we need to sign players here, 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 and here. This is not really like that, because I'm going to be signing players everywhere, all the time anyway, rather than targeting specific positions, unless we're really, really weak there, basically. So it's less important, but it's still nice to see if there's any glaring holes in the team, or maybe we can just identify a position where a player just isn't doing all that well, basically. So let's just take a look at the central midfielders now. We'll just get the DMs in here as well while we're at it. So we're looking really here for playmaking ability as well as tackles, basically. So best tackler in there, Sparv up at 85%, Harmik Singh at 81, Poulsen in there as well. Kirk and Karanen both struggling in that sense, both down under 70s, and that makes me wonder, perhaps not playing those two together might be such a bad idea, because if they are both playing in that midfield, you might find that we're just starting to struggle a little bit with the old tackles. Olsen down at 49% as well, not exactly fantastic, if I'm honest. Key tackles, Sparv, of course, doing a decent job there. Roma would have played in there as well a few times, but we can kind of ignore that one for now. Looking at pass completion, Karanen, this is where Karanen does come into his game. I remember watching a game where we were down to 10 men and Karanen was in the midfield by himself, basically. We only had one midfielder because I just wanted to dominate, and he played an absolute blinder in that game. He was basically taking on like 3 players most of the time and came out with a really solid result for himself, and you can sort of understand why. He's got a decent pass completion so far, but I'd like to see that a little bit higher on some players. It's good to see Singh up there as well. Kirk isn't that far behind, to be honest. Looking at the likes of, who else we got here? Olsen, surprisingly very low, considering he's a type of playmaking type of player. So I'd like to see that a little bit higher next season. Otherwise, we started to have a little bit of a worry there. Sobby, again, with a decent average rating overall. Tackles per game, Sparv only 3, which is interesting. You'd expect him to do a bit more, but then at the same time, I mean, look at 3 mistakes leading to goals as well. I do worry about him sometimes. I really do. Headers 1. Sparv does win a lot of those headers, though. And that's one area that the likes of Karanen just seem to have absolutely no capability of doing. Where's Nikolai Kirk? He's at least a little bit better than Kerrinan. But look at that, Babahide David. He hasn't played much, but Jesus, 11% headers won. And once again, Olsen is fairly low on that one as well. Key passes, again, you'd expect Olsen to be quite high on that, and he actually is. And I feel like if he plays a lot more, he'd probably get a lot more key passes than that. Because if you look at that, he's played like half the amount of games that Sobby has. But he's, you know, if you double that, he'd have way more key passes than Sobby. So he's definitely got an eye for a pass. But only, you know, I still think Sobby does a decent job in that role. But it's good to be able to rotate the two of them. Looking at mistakes-wise, Roma is the king of the mistakes. But again, doesn't play in that position that often. So we can kind of not discount it, but, you know, it isn't relevant to what we're looking at right now. Interceptions, good to see Tim Sparv up there. I'd like to see him up a little bit higher than that, in all honesty, because that defensive midfielder is usually the one that gets a shitload of interceptions. Then again, we're not really often playing him as a defensive midfielder, so I guess we can kind of, you know, when he has played, he's probably played as a centre-back or like a box-to-box midfielder, so maybe we can have a look at that as well. Headers won, look at that Sparv, 8 headers won per game is actually fairly solid, I've got to say. Finally onto strikers, and what we're really looking at here is to see how Václav Kadlec actually compares to the players around him in terms of what he contributes to the team. So looking at tackles won, he actually does a decent job at winning some tackles. So does Pusic. Williamson doesn't seem to have much in that just yet, but then we've only got, you know, 682 minutes of game time for him to really judge him on. Then again, Ibrahim's got a better one, so we could always look at that, I suppose. Crosses in, I mean, look at that. 66% cross completion is actually pretty decent from Williamson. I don't suppose that's out of many crosses, it has to be said, but still, it's nice to see that he's got that capability. Kadlec is not exactly too bad, though. Got a few key tackles to his name as well. As for goals, Kadlec has 24 in 41. Pusic has got 11 in 6 starts, and Williamson 8 in 7 starts, which is pretty damn good, to be honest. And Ibrahim 3 in 1 start. So generally, most of our backup strikers are certainly scoring goals when they're given the chances. Now, pass completion as well. Williamson and Ibrahim seem to link the game up just a tiny fraction better than Kadlec. It's a 3% swing, but it's still noticeable in that it's there, I suppose. Williamson is not a dribbly player, let's put it that way. There's nothing falling out of his mouth. He is clearly just a no-nonsense striker, and maybe that's what this tactic needs a little bit more of. A bit more no-nonsense play. Although it does seem that, well, Kadlec has got the same kind of shots on target ratio as Williamson, slightly better. Ibrahim a little bit more, but again, I feel like over a few more games that might not be as high as that. It's hard to tell at this point. Average ratings, Ibrahim and Williamson have definitely outperformed in the games that they have played. Pusic is the lowest performer, which is interesting, but I guess it could be a lot of sort of failed substitute appearances could potentially contribute to that. Looking at games won, again, Ibrahim in there, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And you'd expect Williamson to be better on this one. I'd expect him to be winning more like 60%, but again, maybe over a longer period of time as he becomes a slightly better player, that's definitely an option. But what it really shows is how much better in the air he is than Kadlec. And I'd be interested to see how many headed goals Williamson has scored for us in the back end of this season compared to what Kadlec does, which is very, very little in that sense. He's got more key headers, but that's because he's played more. And that's definitely noticeable. Now, looking at key passes, it's interesting to see that Williamson played a lot less minutes than Pusic, but is not that far behind. Actually, no, he is a little bit far behind because looking at the actual minutes, he's played just over half the amount of minutes. Mistakes, pretty much the same in that sense. Passes completed, Williamson and Kadlec's pretty damn low on that one, interestingly. But what I would say is there's a decent number of interceptions from Williamson in a relatively small period of time, in fact. And you feel like if you'd played a bit more, he'd definitely have intercepted a lot more than Kadlec's over that time as well. Headers 1 per 90 minutes, he is up on that one, and he actually has more shots than anyone else as well. So that's kind of just taking a little look. Obviously, this analysis will have more and more players to take a look at, but I'm still going to keep them. They'll probably be quite long episodes, let's face it, but that's kind of what you want, for these. If you're not interested, that's totally fine, but I just make them so I can kind of get a few things in my own head as well. It's good to talk out loud about these things and actually sort of, I don't know, you're thinking out loud can sometimes give you ideas. It certainly worked a lot with Wimbledon. It's going to work less so with this save, of course, because we're not looking for signings based on this. We're just sort of analysing the players that we've got to see if anyone's really underperforming. So, for example, I'm not entirely happy with Sakibo's performance this year, but I'm not entirely to the point where I feel like he's not good enough. I feel like if he does it again next year, then we might have to look at moving him onto another Danish side while he's still young for solid money so that he can then be moved on, if they do want to sell him, for massive money. That's the way I'd look at it. He might be the first one that we sort of move on in that sort of fashion. So if you have enjoyed this, guys, do be sure to hit the like button. I'm sorry it's probably been like 40 minutes long, this one, but we have more stuff to talk about and stuff to show you, so I figured we might as well at this point. In for a penny, in for 40 minutes, as they say. So yeah, drop a like on the video, that'd be spectacular. And for some reason, if this is the first video of mine that you've actually seen, then do subscribe for more videos like this in your inbox every single day at 7. Well, not videos like this is once a season. This is at 9 o'clock usually. And I will join you guys for transfer goodies tomorrow. Going to be doing a full transfer window episode, basically. So it's going to be all transfer stuff, which I think is going to be fun. It means I can show you guys a little bit more of the negotiations and things like that. So I will join you guys then. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.